Greetings from Cape Cod. Thank you for attending this session, Data-Driven Climate Action on Cape Cod. I'm Christy Senatori, the Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission. I'm pleased to be presenting again at this year's Geodesign Summit. The Cape Cod Commission is the regional planning, land use, and economic development agency for Cape Cod. We were established by an act of the legislature in 1990 after an unprecedented growth boom on Cape Cod in the 1980s, and we serve the citizens in 15 towns of Barnstable County. Our mission is to protect the unique values and quality of life on Cape Cod by coordinating a balanced relationship between environmental protection and economic progress. Even more simply put, our mission is to keep Cape Cod a special place. The Commission strives to foster a viable year-round economy with thriving activity centers and well-preserved natural habitats and open spaces, and cultivate a sustainable and resilient region with strong intermunicipal coordination and regional infrastructure. Cape Cod is a fragile peninsula in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with over 500 miles of coastline. We face many regional challenges, including significant impacts from climate change. Climate change is a critical challenge impacting the world, but let's take a look more specifically at the state of Massachusetts. Since 1895, the temperature has risen 2.9 degrees Fahrenheit, and the growing season has been extended by 15 days. As indicated by a tidal gauge in Boston, sea level has risen 11 inches since 1992, and since 1958, we've seen a 55% increase in heavy precipitation days. By the end of the century, we could see temperatures rise 7.2 degrees annually, see an increase in 90-degree days, a sea level rise of 4 to 10.2 feet, and a 47% annual increase in heavy precipitation days. We spent the last several years investigating the environmental and socioeconomic effects of local and regional coastal resiliency strategies. Our Resilient Cape Cod program supports regional-scale projects that enhance the resilience of coastal communities and economies to the effects of extreme weather, climate hazards, and changing ocean conditions, and focuses on the effects of erosion, storm surge, and sea level rise. The decision support tool, our Cape Cod Coastal Planner seen here, communicates the impacts of coastal threats and adaptation strategies, including costs and benefits, and the need for action in a GIS-based tool that allows for user interaction. The Coastal Planner, found at capecodcoast.org, educates users on the climate change hazards impacting Cape Cod's coastline, the adaptation strategies available to address them, and implications for local infrastructure and ecosystems. Our regional plans, including the Regional Transportation Plan and Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, recognize that there is a need for the Cape to come together as a region to address the impacts of climate change. Our 2018 Regional Policy Plan included a series of climate action recommendations. The largest of those recommendations was to examine greenhouse gas emissions for the region. We have completed an inventory of the regional greenhouse gas emissions for Cape Cod that will help us set goals and targets moving forward. We also completed an electric vehicle charging station siting analysis, as well as a solar screening tool. Both of these applications will be helpful not only for the community, but for developers and municipalities that are looking to potentially site both EV charging stations and utility-scale solar in the future. One way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is to support the increased adoption of electric vehicles and the infrastructure necessary for their use. The Commission has developed a screening analysis that identifies potential locations appropriate for EV charging stations. In 2018, there were nearly 18,000 electric vehicles on the road in Massachusetts, and there's projected to be over 200,000 by the year 2025. In order to support future demand, Cape Cod must develop the necessary infrastructure required by this alternative mode of transportation. Knowing that Cape Cod will continue to see more electric vehicles in the future, we need to plan for the appropriate infrastructure to support the demand for both residents and tourists. Another way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and slow the effects of climate change in the energy sector is to support the replacement of greenhouse gas-intensive fossil fuels with cleaner, renewable forms of energy. Solar energy is a form of renewable energy that can help governments, businesses, and individuals meet climate goals. The Commission has also developed a solar screening tool that will help guide large-scale solar projects toward appropriate areas and away from important conservation areas. The tool considers both built and natural environments to identify areas more or less appropriate for solar development. It's designed for use by anyone interested in developing or reviewing large-scale solar facilities. Building on our previous climate planning work, the Commission is now working with stakeholders and partners to develop the first-ever climate action plan for Cape Cod. Mitigating the causes of climate change and adapting to its effects on Cape Cod involves regional planning and policy decisions with both environmental and economic considerations. As we're developing the Climate Action Plan, it's important for us to take a look at other climate action plans from around the country. We've reviewed almost 50 plans and looked at 17 in detail. We look closely at plans that contained both adaptation and mitigation strategies, key components we'll be including in the Cape Cod Climate Action Plan. We looked at these plans broadly to develop our own strategy for a climate action plan. We looked at the framework, identifying components we want in our region, for example, regional and local climate risks and vulnerabilities, and identified adaptation and mitigation strategies. Planning for climate action is multifaceted and includes a variety of elements. Our climate action plan will include the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, a Cape-wide survey that aims to get a better understanding of community members' knowledge of climate change and their willingness to change their behavior to adapt to and mitigate climate change. Our Student Ambassadors program will engage our younger population, and we're developing a matrix of strategies for action. The legal and jurisdictional analysis, a key component of the plan, will ensure that the appropriate levels of government and individuals are able to take the appropriate actions. We are conducting fiscal and economic modeling, exploring the cost of strategies and the cost of doing nothing. Finally, we are engaging with stakeholders, the most critical component of developing an implementable climate action plan. The purpose of not only the climate action planning process, but also the climate action plan, is to identify, study, and monitor the causes and consequences of climate change on Cape Cod as a basis to guide and develop science-based policies, strategies, and actions that governments, businesses, organizations, and individuals can pursue to improve the region's resilience to climate hazards and mitigate climate change on Cape Cod through reducing net regional greenhouse gas emissions in support of the framework and targets established by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This overall purpose statement is guiding plan development and the overall structure of the plan. A regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory provides communities with information to understand opportunities for emissions reduction. This information can be used to develop and implement actions and strategies to reduce emissions on Cape Cod, and more importantly, sets a baseline for measuring future performance in reducing regional emissions. A greenhouse gas emissions inventory is a comprehensive accounting of total greenhouse gas emissions for all man-made sources. In creating our Cape Cod greenhouse gas inventory, we aimed to calculate an inventory that provides a complete picture of emissions from Cape Cod, to establish an accounting method that's comparable and reproducible so we can continue to measure emissions going forward, to identify our high sector emissions, and to develop a detailed inventory specific to our region. We calculated the inventory using 2017 data as a baseline, consistent with the state. All data collected is consistent with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, guidelines. This quick snapshot of the results of our greenhouse gas emissions inventory shows as a region we contribute more than 3.5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Emissions were calculated for 6 sectors, and as you can see, transportation is our highest emitting sector. The emissions from this sector are primarily from on-road passenger cars. Our next highest emitting sector is stationary energy. This is primarily from residential natural gas use. And then to a lesser degree, there are emissions from waste, industrial processes, and product use, and agriculture. And then, per the calculations in the land use sector, we've identified that our region has the potential to sequester approximately 9% of the total emissions from the region. Statewide, stationary energy and transportation are also the highest emitting sectors. However, unlike the Cape at the state level, stationary energy emits more than transportation. Similarly, with the industrial processes and product use and waste sectors, industrial processes is a higher emitting sector statewide, not surprising, given our relatively low industrial uses in the Cape Cod region. The Cape Cod Commission is collaborating with stakeholders to identify strategies and develop an action plan to address the critical challenges posed by climate change. After issuing a call for interested participants, we selected over 100 citizens, and we developed a stakeholder process that ensures balanced representation of all interests. After a series of municipal working group meetings to better understand local goals, capacity, and needs relative to climate action, 4 working groups were established to provide feedback in the topic areas of transportation, housing and development, natural resources and working lands, and energy. Stakeholders met in a series of 3 3-hour meetings and have contributed to defining the problem, developing climate adaptation and mitigation actions, and approaches to communication and education, and have worked with us to develop an implementation strategy outlining important actions and actors. The Cape Cod Climate Action Plan will include a database of goals, strategies, actions, and steps to be taken in implementing the plan. The matrix is based on literature review, stakeholder input, and other local efforts, and as you can see, contains 5 high-level focus areas down to a more granular level with 366 actionable steps. The database behind each of the sector areas of housing and development, energy, transportation, natural resources, and community contains information and resources on each of the strategies, actions, and multiple steps, and identifies key actors needed for successful implementation. For example, in the housing sector, addressing the strategy of striving toward net zero energy building are several steps that need action by several key players, including government, organizations, businesses, and individuals. Lastly, it's important to quantify some of the economic impacts of certain mitigation scenarios. We are working with an outside consultant to develop a fiscal model to determine costs and benefits of strategies. We're analyzing the economic impacts of climate hazards and identifying the fiscal impacts our region might face, such as potential business interruptions, damage to buildings, and public health impacts. We are comparing different mitigation scenarios and reviewing some of the key metrics such as emissions comparisons, and we're evaluating the cost of taking no action. What would be the impact on our environment and our economy if we take no further action as a region? The decisions we make today have the ability to impact our region for decades. Responding and adapting to and mitigating the significant effects of climate change is arguably our biggest regional challenge, with widespread and cross-sector impacts on Cape Cod. Thank you for your attention to this session.